Whether you're seeking inspiration, wisdom, or a fresh perspective on leadership and entrepreneurship, the Building Interest podcast has you covered. Together, we explore the successes of groundbreaking leaders, the triumphs, the challenges, and the invaluable lessons they learn along the way. Our discussions go beyond strategic decision-making and delve into the personal hobbies and passions that keep these leaders inspired and grounded in their work. I'm your host, Greg Farber. Let's jump right in. Today, we're joined by Kate Garabedian, loan officer and real estate financing expert here at Leader Bank. Her passion for real estate and her go-getter mentality have allowed her to become one of the most successful loan officers in Massachusetts, ranking in the top 3% of loan officers in 2024 to be exact. Today, we'll discuss the challenges involved in changing industries, her entrepreneurial values, and how she has turned her love for fitness into a way to give back to the community. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
First episode of the new year, so this is really cool. So we'll kind of go back a little bit at first, and I know that before you found your calling as a loan officer, if that's your calling now, we'll get into that, you were in healthcare. Can you tell us a bit about that and why that was an industry you enjoyed and got into in the first place?
Oh, okay. So I don't know if we have enough time. I'm going to have to cut some parts out, but I started out at Sacred Heart in an exercise science major. I thought I wanted to be once I ruled out being a forensic scientist because I was scared of the dark, I wanted to be a athletic trainer for a sports team. Like, sports were always important to me, so that's where I started, exercise science. And then I realized quickly that you had to work a lot of hours and the pay wasn't really great. So then I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. So then I was pre-med. I added on a bunch of classes. I got a minor in chemistry. I took the MCATs. I passed. I got a decent score. I started applying to schools, and they wanted like $200 a school. And I was like, screw this. Like that, I got to apply to like 20 schools because it's hard to get into them. So then I stopped doing that. And then I actually worked for an eye surgeon at the time. And one of the eye technicians, who is what I did, he said, well, why don't you become a nurse and then you can become a CRNA? So my goal was quickly to become a CRNA, which is a certified registered nurse anesthesiologist. So you work nurse hours, but you get paid, much better for your time. So then I was like, that's what I'm doing. So then I applied to an accelerated nursing program at Fairfield, which was 20 minutes away from Sacred Heart. So I graduated from Sacred Heart in May. I started an 18-month accelerated program in August at Fairfield, and I did that. And then I worked at Yale New Haven on a trauma unit for 18 months because you had to get into an ICU, but nobody's going to hire you directly in an ICU typically right out of school. So, I had to put my time in. But then I ended up loving it. I loved the people. I loved the, experiences I was having. Trauma is mentally and physically taxing, but I learned a lot and appreciated, everything that I got from being there. But then I had enough of being in Connecticut, so I travel nursed to Boston. I applied for a travel agency, and I got a call on my way into work one day, and they're like, oh, yeah, you're starting in 3 weeks at Beth Israel. And I was like, okay. Called Chris, and I'm like, we got to move in 3 weeks. So I'm very like, bring on the change. Let's do something different. Kristen is the opposite. So that was a fun time, but we figured it out and we got here. So then I was at Beth Israel as a travel nurse and Brigham as a travel nurse. And then I never got into an ICU. So I was always burned in trauma for the most part of my career for 6 years. But I had never gotten into an ICU. So then I was like, this is frustrating. So then we moved here in 2015, and in the parallel, because I had my degree in exercise science, I started realizing that there was no, and I'm probably jumping ahead here, but there was no real outlet for kids to work out. So in 2016, we started the fitness studio for kids. And I can go into that further later, but then while I was there, I worked.
You were still working in nursing
at the
same time?
I was still at Brigham. I started the gym, and I also got introduced to a executive director at a school for children with learning disabilities in Natick called Accept. And she found out about my gym, and she needed a fitness program for her kids at the school because it wasn't a typical physical education program. So she needed something, so she brought me on for that. Then I ended up being the nurse leader at that school. So I was the nurse leader, and I was like, I don't know how to be in charge of people. I keep people alive. That's what I do, So it was a very different shift, but she trusted me, and I did that. I created a fitness program there. I was running the gym, and I was still doing night shift at Brigham.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
I don't even know if I answered your question.
No, you definitely did.
Okay.
And then some. And we'll come back to some of those other
Yeah.
things. I definitely want to dig into that. But it's kind of funny because you started out with the exercise science.
Mm-hmm.
You came back around to exercise here later, which we'll get to. But in between, you seemed like you were just sort of trying to find your way and kept bouncing around, but didn't ever find that place where you really were going to land.
Yeah.
So then how does that translate into, okay, I'm going to pack my bags and move over to mortgages?
So while I was doing all of that at the school, one of the nurses...
You weren't busy enough?
Yeah. Honestly, after 3 months, Kristen's like, something's got to give. I was miserable, but I was like making all this money and, doing things that I thought made me happy. But I wasn't sleeping. I was just like never home. It wasn't worth it, So after 3 months of doing that, Kristen was like, it's time for you to give something up. So then while I was at the school, this was in 2018, my dad had been really sick for a while, and then it accelerated, and then he ended up passing away. And once that happened, I was like, I don't want to be in a hospital anymore, because he was in and out, so I was always visiting him, and it just felt like every patient was like, it gave me the ick being there. So unfortunately, that was kind of like
a catalyst.
I'd say.
Reevaluate where you want to be.
And so I was 28 at the time, and I'm like, listen, I should be happy with where I am and what I'm doing, and why can't I be a CRNA yet? And what am I doing wrong? And all this, you have all these like limiting beliefs in your brain. And while I was there, one of the nurses who worked at the school with me, my now manager's wife, I was like, oh, what does your husband do? We just got in a conversation, and I started talking to her, and she told me what he did, and I started Googling what a loan officer was, what it entailed, what was the lifestyle like, all this stuff. So I researched it for months, and then I kept saying, like, can you get me a phone call with your husband? And she's like, LOL, you're a nurse. For like months, I had this conversation. And then this is also a long story, but then I stayed at the school for a year. At the end of the year, at this point, I had left the hospital, because of my dad. And then I stayed at the school, but I still wasn't like, something wasn't like igniting me, right? So
You ended up getting the phone call?
No.
No.
So for the
you just showed up to work without the phone call.
It took me a while to get the phone call. So then I stayed at the school for a year, and then at the end of the year, I had a conversation with the executive director, like, listen, I want to be compensated higher, and she's like, I love you, but I can't do that. And I totally understood, like, everybody's on a budget. So that was me, like, that's what I wanted to hear, because then I was like, all right, Lisa, I need the phone call now. Like, I need it now. And she's like, all right. So then the next day I show up to work, and the executive director brings me in her office, and she's like, here you go, and gave me what I asked for. So then I stayed for another year because I owed it to her. She was a fantastic woman, Marsha Berkowitz, if I can plug her. She's a fantastic human, and it was her last year, so I didn't want to leave her on her last year, so I felt I owed it to her. So I stayed. And then after that, another year. And it's funny, I just went through my emails like last month between me and Jimmy, and it's like all me basically saying like, oh, haven't heard from you. Oh, haven't heard from you. Can I have an interview? Can you meet with me? So it took me 3 interviews and them sending me off like 3 times before they were like, all right, Kate's not going anywhere. We just got to take a chance on her. So that's a very long-winded answer as to how I landed in the loan officer world versus any other world.
It's kind of interesting, right? Because as a kid, you might wake up and want to be a doctor or a nurse or something like that, but no one really wakes up when they're 10 and says, I want to be a loan officer.
Yeah.
Not to mention you don't even know what that means.
Right.
Like you said, you had to go out and Google it. But it can be a rewarding career in its own right, and its core mission is not all that different, right? You're still ultimately trying to help people.
Yeah.
Is that what kind of guides you in being a loan officer? Or
I mean, I think so. I think, when I was a nurse, I was obviously helping people when they were at their worst, their life, like just being in trauma. It's like, one day everything's great and the next day everything's in shambles. So, to help the patient and the families was very hard, at times. But I feel like I learned a lot, and I think obviously not the skill set necessarily like what I did for the patients translated, but I'm able to critical think, I'm able to be empathetic with people. Like, right. Once we get into like
people have to trust you to make a big financial decision. So
also that,
empathy is a big part of that.
Yeah. So, and like nobody, and maybe we're going to talk about this later, but no loan is the same, and it's not often where you get 2 first-time home buyers who own no other real estate, and they're both W-2 base salary employees, and they've been there for 3 years, right. And they have no, not a lot of debt. Like everybody's got a different story, right? And it's not always easy to make it work for somebody. So to be empathetic on what they're going through or what they need, I think helps me a lot. So I think I learned that. Plus the critical thinking aspect, like I said, you have these people with all these layers. Like it's usually self-employed people who make a lot more than it looks like they do on paper, and they own a few real estates, but they run them at a loss, for tax purposes. So to find programs where they fit, you have to critically think like, oh, this program will allow, real estate income, or this one won't. And then this one allows, less than 2 years tax return, whatever the special case might be.
Right. There's a lot of problem solving. And I don't know if I used to be a mortgage underwriter. So
okay.
I share your understanding that no two borrowers are the same.
Yeah.
And when you do get that one easy file, it's
everyone is, there's like,
it's a unicorn.
Yeah.
And it's once in a great while.
There's a chain of emails that says, wow, this was a great one. Wow, this was a great one.
So do you have any advice for someone that is maybe going to look to transition into mortgage? I mean, you make it sound easy, right? Not easy in the sense that it took you forever to get the phone call and sort of get your way in, but you heard about it, you researched it, you decided you liked this, and you made it happen.
Yeah.
But there's got to be some sort of, hurdles along the way or any advice you'd give to someone?
I'd say the best advice I could give somebody would be, if you're going to do it, you have to be 100%. Especially, if you want to be, Leader Bank in and of itself is a credible place. Like I don't want to be anywhere else. I'm glad I've never had to go anywhere else. I hear, not great stories at other places. So I'm super thankful where I am. But, there are other places you could go and have an easier time per se. But when I started out, I was 100% commission, right? So like if I didn't make this work, we were living on Kristen's salary, so I had to make it work. So for me, it's a world where, and like I said, Leader Bank's great in the sense that like, even though it's sort of like an individual, like I get my own business kind of thing, there is a team aspect to it, right? Like my processors, my underwriters, Jimmy and Dave, my managers, like if I have a question, I can go to any other LO and ask them, if they've encountered this, what do they think, but when you're starting out, you have to be your own cheerleader. Like nobody's gonna sit there and like pat your back and like, you know what I mean? Like,
right. Anybody could start as a loan officer, but not necessarily be successful at it if they don't understand sort of those key parts that you just mentioned. Yeah,
you got to have the drive. And I think I'm just trying to go back. Like all I did was I just hustled. I tried to meet as many people as I could and tell as many new people as I could what I did, and like essentially faked it till I made it, right? Like, any question that was asked of me, I was like, that's a great question. Let me ask my underwriter. Like I didn't know when I first started out. I was like, one, trying to learn how to do sales, because it's essentially sales in the sense, but not like slimy sales, right? Like I think when you do mortgages, if you work for a credible place like Leader Bank, I don't feel like a salesperson. Like, I get referrals from realtors or past clients, and I really just talk to them like we're humans. I don't do the hard sell thing. I don't have to, because a lot of the times realtors are like, here's Kate, she's a great LO, she works at Leader Bank, great bank, so that helps me not have to be super like aggressive in my sales, which I like, because if I had to be pushy, it would be a lot less fun, I feel.
Well, I keep hearing things that kind of along the lines of the word motivation. And so maybe what we'll do is we'll go a little bit onto your entrepreneurial side now. And I guess being an entrepreneur kind of starts with just starting, for lack of a better word, right? If you don't start somewhere, you don't ever get anywhere. So how do you stay motivated in that entrepreneurial mindset, whether it's some of the other projects you've worked on or just jumping in and doing a whole new career? What keeps you going?
The motivation, it's not a tough one per se, but I feel like a broken record if I say, like, for me, it's just setting goals, right? Like my goal this year is 100 million. Am I going to hit that? I don't want to say probably not, but like, that's a big feat. So for me, I set a goal that is hard to attain, and I work my ass off to get as close to it as I possibly can.
It has to be somewhat attainable, but it has to be far enough
out of
out
reach.
that it's not like, well, it's February. I've met my goal. I'm done for the year.
Correct.
Right. That keeps you
Yeah.
firing towards that ultimate reward.
I feel like people want what they can't have. I can't have 100 million yet, and I want it real bad. You know what I mean? So 75 million sounds great, but my best year was 70. So like, you know, yeah, that would be a more attainable goal, but I want 100 million, and I'm not going to stop grinding until I get there. So that's what keeps me motivated. Literally, I printed out a $100 million piece of paper and I put it on my computer next to my desk at the office. And every month I'm going to write what I close. And if I get there, I get there. If I don't, I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm going to try again next year.
Right. You have to stay positive, but you have to keep reminding yourself that that's where you want to get to. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you if you had a recipe for success, but it sounds like that's your recipe right there. Just post it on the wall and go for it.
I'd say it's like, there's no one thing I think that makes entrepreneurs successful, but if I had to narrow it down, I'd say like just being persistent, one, because it's funny, like I started 8 months before COVID and people are like, oh, you're so lucky. Okay, fine, maybe the timing was right, but I was persistent to get the job. I was persistent for those 8 months and I was consistent in my grind and my meeting people. And I met so many people in those first 8 months that allowed me to go into the COVID.
Right. Where you couldn't meet people, but you had already established
what I needed. You know, so I think luck, yes, has something to do with it. But for success, I think you have to be persistent. You have to want it. Like if you don't want it, then it's not going to happen. And if you expect to get rich or successful overnight, that's also not going to happen. So I'd say consistency and being persistent.
And I think being a loan officer does definitely require some entrepreneurial spirit, right? I mean, there are loan officers that kind of just hang out in a call center and they get incoming calls based on the brand or something like that. And you need that. But the traditional loan officer really is kind of an independent character. Like you were saying, like you're working on your own book of business and to your own relationships and everything. So have you found that having that sort of independent entrepreneurial spirit is what's able to make you successful as a loan officer? Or is there something else? Is there another secret sauce that goes into being a loan officer? Or is it just that I'm doing this for myself, it keeps me going, and I don't have to necessarily meet other people's goals. I can meet my own goals.
It's funny because when I met with Jimmy and Dave, the Needham branch managers, they were like, why don't you go to a place where you can sit at a call center and get leads and they'll give you a salary? And I said, I don't want that. And they're like, are you sure you don't know anything about sales or the mortgage industry? Like, you're going to not get a salary here. And I'm like, you don't understand. That's what I want and that's what I need. Like, if I went to the call center, I'm right back to where essentially I was in, the nurse world as far as like scheduling and pay, right? So my goal, like what drives me is financial freedom and time freedom, right? Like I used to want like unlimited money. And then as I got older, I was like, yeah, that's great. Financial freedom is still my goal, but I really want more time. Like I want to do what I want with my days. So if I'm somewhere where I'm capped to a salary and I'm like, all right, I just don't want to get trapped.
Or stuck to desk hours.
Yeah. So it's just not for me. So yes, to your point, I think the fact that I had to build my own book of business from zero is what truly made me bust my butt. Is it butt? To make it happen for me. So I didn't know it was going to happen quite as fast as it did for me, but I like to think my hard work kind of helped a lot.
Well, it seems like the kind of thing that can snowball a little bit too.
Yeah.
Right? Like once you get that first foot in this door and in this door, like you said, you have realtors that would recommend you or use our brand as, hey, she's at Leader Bank. This is a great platform type of thing that helps kind of move it along. But
yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So let's step out of the office a little bit.
Okay.
We talked to you offline, just from your intro and from your comments earlier. We know that fitness is a major part of your life. Kind of open-ended question. What do you love about fitness? Like, why is this such a big part of your life?
Yeah, I think I became in love with it probably like my senior year of high school. And I feel like when you're younger and, life sucks, like, my mom was sick, my dad was sick back then. Everybody has their stuff going on and I never wanted to talk about it. Like that wasn't my outlet. It wasn't to like talk about how I felt. It was to compartmentalize and internalize and go to the gym and like
punch a boxing bag to get your energy out.
Do the exercise that I have control over, right? So, and that's what I've realized now as I'm older. I did it because I had control over the exercise, right? Like the stress in my life, I didn't have control over. And I didn't know this back then, and I made this revelation recently, but I think that's why exercise was such a big outlet for me. And then it, catapulted into college, and I played basketball in college too. So, there was a point in time where I was probably exercising too much, and Kristen had to reel me in a little bit. But, now I think I have a healthy balance of it, and also now talking about my feelings. I've developed that skill as well. But as far as the fitness, I just think it's a nice outlet for people to, express themselves in a way where there's no, well, I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead here to the gym, express them. So the gym, we created it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
You mentioned for yourself that you used it as an outlet at a time when maybe you didn't have another way to express the emotions or the frustrations that you were feeling at the time. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of the motivator behind doing this for kids? Yeah.
And so when I was younger, I did martial arts with my dad for a decade. And when I was at that age, all these now that I look back, I'm oh my God, I was such an entrepreneur when I was younger. I was wow, this business model is great. These kids come here after school, they do this fun thing, they meet all these friends, they hang out. We used to have sleepovers there, and parents paid. We'd buy shirts and parents paid. And then I started making nunchucks I had my dad cut PVC pipe, and I made nunchucks, and I'd sell them for $20 each. And I didn't even know that, for me, it was just fun and not something I was doing. But looking back, I was very entrepreneurial. Anyway, I did a tangent there, sorry. So I did martial arts for that time. And then, and then I also played sports, right? So I did martial arts, which I thought was an inclusive kind of scenario. And then sports where it's it's got a different vibe, right? And you have to want to do that. And then as I got older and we moved here in 2015, I was there's no outlet for kids who don't want to necessarily do martial arts, but that sort of social aspect of it, but also don't want to do team-oriented sports.
Traditional in-school type sports.
Right. So Kristen and I came up with this idea to create, it was group fitness classes. So we would do 20 minutes of cardio, 20 minutes, or 25 minutes of cardio, 25 minutes of muscular endurance, because when they're younger, you don't really focus on strength, which I don't want to totally...
what age range are we even talking here?
So we did as young as 2, and then our oldest was 16, yeah. So we had toddler classes, and then we had different age brackets, but the classes were geared towards athletes and non-athletes, and they could be in the same class, and they could do the same stuff at their own pace, and we blasted music, and we played games at the end, and there was zero bullying. And people could just, kids who would probably never be friends in school became friends at our gym. And then they'd start coming to the gym, and they'd be oh, I saw you in the hallway today. And that was just awesome,
So just a super fun place to go and let it out and be yourself without feeling the pressure of a team sport or something like that.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, that can't be easy to set that up.
No, it wasn't.
Again, with the entrepreneurism. So, how do you... I mean, I can only sit. I'm thinking here, oh my God, there's 100 million obstacles I could think of to prevent you from opening a gym for kids, no less, and the age and the consent and the liability and all these other things. How do you navigate through all of that? And just how long did this take from conception in your brain to we actually have a gym and we have kids enrolled and they're coming and they're having a great time?
So I think the idea started in my head probably in 2012, but I never did anything about it until when we moved here, so 2015. And then I started doing a lot of research and what would it take and what would I have to do and how much money would I have to have. And then I was looking at, loans versus all this stuff. So by 2016, I have, and Kristen won't let me throw it out, it's a friggin' yellow pad of paper with my handwritten, my why and my motivation and what's the point of Natick Youth Fit and all this stuff.
There you go again, writing it down, putting your $100 million on the wall.
Yeah. So we still have that, but I just, I started that, and then I was a nurse, and at the time, our nephew moved in with us for 6 months, so we were navigating that world as well, which is also very complicated. But my point is, Kristen and I were trying to support a 2-year-old and ourselves, and we were 24, and our salaries weren't great. And so I had like $500 in my bank account, and I'm like, let's start a gym. So I took my, savings and bought like 6 pieces of equipment off Amazon, started looking on LoopNet to rent places, and I found this facility in Natick, and they use it for jiu-jitsu. So I was able to sublease it for very cheap. It's like $1,000 a month. But I shared this space. That's what allowed it to be so cheap. And so then I literally would just print flyers, like cheap flyers, and we would walk parking lots and put them on car windshields. And then I'd do like a Natick market, and I'd set up a stand, and we'd bring some obstacles and have the kids do it and like give away, little things. And then I would just literally sit at the desk, and probably for like 6 to 8 months had nobody come in. Like nobody ever wanted to do it. So then eventually we started getting, more traction, and then we created schedules and bought more fancy equipment. We had like a huge wall for the kids to jump over. It was great. We got to like 100 kids at one point. So
was that kind of an I made it moment?
I think so. Like
it was all worth it when that comes together?
I mean, when we got to the point where we could have like weekend seminars and had, 60 kids sign up for it, that was pretty cool.
So with all that going on, and you mentioned it before with the nursing, and then with trying to get your other job lined up and moving into mortgages and everything else, I often hear from people, no matter how smart or energetic or motivated or whatever else they are, that they're just tired, right? And so I think one of the most overlooked parts of success is taking care of yourself. And you mentioned at one point that you also kind of knew you got to a point where you had to let something go in order to be able to go further. Mm-hmm. Can you share with us a little bit about managing work-life balance, especially with so many different projects and ideas that are coming from your head and into reality?
So I eventually, we had the gym for probably 6 or 7 years. And then eventually, COVID didn't crush us, but it kind of just like slowed us down a bit. And then I started getting very busy with the mortgages. So we made the tough decision probably, I think it was 1.5 years or 2 years ago, to just like be done with it. And so releasing my time from the gym was super helpful. But also just, one of the biggest reasons I wanted to become a loan officer was the flexible schedule, right? Like I'm always on, essentially. Like if somebody needs a pre-approval on the weekend, I have my laptop with me. I can crunch numbers. I can send it. But there's some days like when I don't have a lot going on and I'm like, Kristen, let's go get lunch, So I think that helps a lot. And when I went in this direction, I had the conversation with Kristen, like, one, I'm going to make no money in the beginning. And 2, I'm going to have to work a lot in the beginning, but then hopefully get to the point where I can do things like, I'm going to work a half day today because I need a break, So it's not as hard as I thought it would be to balance work life. I think essentially also because we can go to the Cape for a week where I'm relaxing, but I also am working, but I'm not working every waking moment that I'm there,
right.
But I'm
it's
thankful.
A different mindset.
Yeah.
You're available.
Yeah. And for me, I'd rather have that kind of lifestyle than somebody telling me I can take 2 weeks off a year.
Do you find you have to keep reminding yourself of that? Do you get too deep into it and you have to step back, or have you managed to kind of just figure out to pace yourself?
Yeah, I think I've finally figured it out. There was a point in time where I was working like, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. most days. But I think I honestly, there was a point in time where I burnt out a little bit. So, some of my realtors might have at some point in my career noticed it took me 48 hours to get back to them instead of 24 or 2, depending on the question. But I think going through the burnout helped me find balance and like calmness. Like I felt like if I wasn't working, then I felt like I should always be doing something to like try to grow my business. And if I wasn't, I felt guilty. So that took some...
I'm sitting down, relaxing.
Yeah.
I should be doing something else.
Right. Because I don't have a boss who says, do these 10 tasks and you're done for the day.
Right.
It's me, right? So like if I do those 10 things and then I don't finish them, and then I do finish them and I'm doing nothing, I'm wondering why, like there's got to be something else I could do, So that was hard.
But you can pace yourself and focus on the quality over the quantity.
That's true.
And the better relationship and the better product
Yeah.
versus, like you said, not getting back to people in the
Right.
time frame that they've gotten used to or things.
Yeah.
You get back to the quality of it, and that probably helps you more in the long run than the
Yeah.
sheer quantity.
For sure. And I think that will prevent me from having another, burnout kind of scenario. So it was short-lived and I'm fine, but.
No, I think that is generally a really important thing that people overlook, that there's this feeling you have to work hard, you have to earn it to get ahead. I mean, unfortunately, there's some people who get ahead without working hard, but most of us have to work hard to get somewhere.
Right.
But if you work so hard that you ruin yourself in the process, you're
Yeah.
also not getting ahead. So.
Yeah. And this industry is tough too, right? Like rates go up, rates go down, people buy, people don't, people refi, people don't.
Right, you have ebbs and flows.
So it takes, every year I know February is slow, but every year in February I'm like, why am I not like producing like I produce in other months? It can be mentally taxing.
Even though you've rationalized it, you still don't like to sit there and
Correct.
see the business go down.
Yeah.
Right.
Even though I have a spreadsheet for year over year, what I do each month, what I do each quarter, like I have the numbers to support it, and then the year end, the bigger picture, but I still like hyper focus on why do I have such less business in February? So just being okay with that and understanding, that that's just part of the industry I'm in, and reminding myself that I'm super thankful that I made this choice and made this jump and worked hard and got to where I am, so that I have the freedom that I have,
Some reflection and some self-awareness.
Yeah. So.
All right, well, let's move to a segment that we've been doing recently where it's what would you choose?
Okay.
And so I'm going to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions.
Oh,
and
God,
you just tell me, what would you choose?
Okay.
You don't have, there's no right or wrong answer. They're just kind of for fun. But feel free to elaborate on anything if you feel like there's more to the answer, or if you're like, oh, I can't pick. You have to pick. But
Okay.
All right. Colonial or Cape style?
Cape.
Really? Okay. Now, you didn't mention ever living on the Cape, but you mentioned going to the Cape. Is this just like a getaway thing? Like you like Cape styles because it's sort of a happy place for you?
Well, to go on another tangent, I grew up in Westerly, Rhode Island, so I grew up on the water. Okay. So the Cape for me was always like, people in Massachusetts drive an hour to the Cape. Like I skip school and go to the beach for fun, like that's where we went. But then when I moved here, Chris and I actually recently bought a house on the Cape, so we have a property down there. So I have become a little bit more.
It's a little your happy place.
Yeah. So, and our first house was also a Cape style, I think.
So Cape house notwithstanding, do you prefer city or suburb?
Oh God. So another tangent. I always want to live in the city, but we started out with 2 dogs, and Kristen's like, we can't have dogs in the city. They need grass. So we moved into Natick, and then we bought a house in Framingham, and then we moved again, and I was like, why don't we move into the city for a year, and then we'll keep the place and we'll rent it out. And she's like on board. And then we made a couple offers on places and then kind of changed our mind and never happened. So I think at heart, which I never saw through, probably city, but I don't know. I also hate traffic. So maybe suburb. Can I split it down the middle?
Kind of have to pick one, but
okay. Suburb.
It sounds like you picked suburb functionally, but you kind of lean towards the city.
I think my heart is always interested in just like living here and seeing what it's like, but I feel like I can't pick it because I was never here. So.
Well, you got to go just suburban enough that you can hop on the train and still be in the city really quickly, which we do and almost never go. Like, you want it, but then you don't even use it.
Exactly.
When you have it. All right, and I'm probably going to pronounce this all wrong, but basketball or bar?
Like alcohol bar?
No, like bar-y.
Oh, basketball for sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. You said you played.
Yeah.
You play competitively?
I played in college, and since then I just kind of play pickup now. In Weston and Wellesley. I play in Cambridge a little bit. You want to play?
No. I'm horrible at basketball.
They might want to play.
They might. Jay will play with you. Jay always talks about basketball when he comes on.
I know. He made me be his cornhole partner, and then I totally let him down at one of the...
Slightly different throwing motion.
Well, he saw me play once, and I played well, and then he put me on his team, and I couldn't... I was like, where's the hole over there? I don't know. Sorry, Jay.
Okay. So you're going to go work out. Morning or evening?
Morning.
Any reason for that?
if I work out in the evening, one, I want to just like chill out in the evening.
But then you'll feel guilty that you're not doing anything.
That is true. That is very true. So when I say chill out, I'm usually on the couch and have my laptop open on my lap. So
No.
I know.
But yeah, I get the morning thing.
Yeah,
I get
morning.
that.
Kind of just like catapults me into the day kind of thing.
Now, maybe not so much for working out because that's something that you probably have more of a routine, but do you prefer things in your life to be more routine or more spontaneous?
So that's also a hard one, I feel, because I'm very much like I need a routine to like get my stuff done. But then sometimes I'm like, screw it, let's go. We're going to do this, you know? So I have both. For my mornings, I like a routine for sure. And I like to like, so my goal is to like my morning routine and then like work super hard in the morning. And then I'm trying to build a team to help me out like with back end stuff so I don't have to necessarily be bogged down with all of that. And then I can be out there meeting more people in the afternoon or like, you know, if I want to go get lunch or something, you know. So the goal would be routine in the morning, spontaneous in the afternoon, evening.
Okay.
Here I go,
Another
picking
split
both
answer.
again. This is not good. I'm supposed to be more decisive than this.
Oh, that's all right. But you're
Routine.
getting both things accomplished.
Yeah. Well, you told me I had to pick, so
I
routine.
know. Last one then, and you've mentioned team a couple of times just now with kind of building a team around you as well as the support that you mentioned as far as, you know, being able to go to Jim and Dave with your questions or other LOs or process under everything around you. Are you more about working with the team or succeeding individually? And I don't mean that in a bad way, like succeed individually in spite of others, but is your focus for you or is your focus part of the team?
I'd say my focus is for me because my team, while they help me and I couldn't do anything I do without them, you know, if I left, they still all, you know, are part of the Leader Bank team. I have to fend for Kate, right? So like
You're the one with the $100 million goal.
Yeah, exactly. So they helped me get there for sure. Like Matt Gatewood, Mike Gerard, my processors, underwriters, like everybody at Needham, they're fantastic. So I love my team. There's not a single person there that I have a single bad thing to say about. But I'd say my drive is based on me individually growing.
Awesome. You did good. You think you split some answers, but that's the whole point. It's just fun. It's just a little get to know you type of thing.
All right.
So now we're going to get to know you one more interesting way.
Okay.
This is the part we call bringing inspiration. And so, as you know, we asked you to tell us or bring or share something with us that does or has specifically inspired you and kind of tell us the story around that and why that's important to you.
Okay. Well, this was hard because I didn't have like a specific item, but I did bring something.
You brought your yellow pad of paper?
I should have actually.
You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah. My friend's going to be so pumped I brought this. So my friend recently made this for me. It's called a lithopane. Do you know what that is?
I do not.
So it's like a 3D plastic printed image, and that's my race car.
Ooh.
And so if you hold it up to the light, the thicker images will be darker.
Oh, wow.
You see it?
I do.
Isn't that so cool?
Now, when you say your race car.
Yeah, that's my car. So the reason I brought that for my inspiration, his name's Tim Hicks, by the way. He made that. So the reason I brought that is he just made this for me recently is because I have a new passion for racing vintage cars. I do it with my father-in-law. And one of my goals is to have a fleet of cars. So fleet of daily drivers and a fleet of race cars. So that's why I brought this.
You actually take it to a track and do racing?
Yeah.
Can I come?
Sure. We go to... So cool.
That it really is. And the detail is amazing when you hold it up like that. You can't see it when it's like laying flat on the table, but...
So that's, he brought this over and surprised me with it. And I thought it was so cool. And I was like, why is it so small? I want a bigger one. I want one that has like 4 squares and I have 4 cars in it, so.
Set a goal.
Yeah. I thought that would be a good inspiration because my goal is like, financial freedom and time and have a fleet of cars.
Unlimited money can get you all the cars,
right.
But then if you have no time to do anything with, the goal is to actually to use it.
So I race in West Virginia once a year. Actually, there's 2 races. It's at Summit Point, and then we're at Thompson in Connecticut, which is like 45 minutes from Metro West. And then Lime Rock, Connecticut, that's a fun one. Watkins Glen, New York. I'm actually going to Canada this year for a week race. That will be super cool. So.
Wow. Like with the whole, like you have the car and a trailer, the whole like works.
So this is a whole nother conversation. But when I started with my father.
I don't want to wrap up now. We're done here. I want to keep talking about racing.
My father-in-law's been doing this for somewhere between 12 and 15 years. And so like probably 4 or 5 years ago, I got more interested in it. So for a year, he took me to the track and I just watched and all this. And then one of his friends was selling his BMW 2002. It's a 1976. And he wanted me in a safe car that he knew was maintained well and all this stuff. So he basically was like, you're buying this car. So I bought that car and then I started racing. I think this will be my 4th year racing with him. So it's something we do together. I actually have a picture of us. I can show you quick. Of him in front of me coming around a bend at Lime Rock, and he's on 3 wheels. It's on my Instagram.
Have you souped up all the components? I'm guessing it's not original.
No, it's
mechanicals in there anymore.
It's not original, and I have in there whatever So I like to race the car, but I don't necessarily. Oh, so I know what I went off on another tangent. I don't necessarily know how to handle under the hood yet. I'm trying to learn. But when I started racing, I bought the car, and then I told my father-in-law, I don't want to tow it. I want someone to bring it for me. I want to be an arrive and drive. He's like, that's expensive, but if you want to pay for it, go for it. And it's like, it could be anywhere from like $3,000 to $10,000 a race just to have somebody, maintain your car, bring your car, be trackside, all this stuff. So then I was like, all right, fine, I'll tow it. So he got himself a nice fancy trailer, and I used his old trailer and put the car in there, and then I bought a SUV that could tow. So I tow it to West Virginia once a year, but that's him on 3 wheels in front of me.
Nice.
Yeah. So he has the same car.
If I don't know if you're willing or able to share that, but if you could send that to
sure.
These guys, they could put it up in the in the thing.
He has
really cool.
He has a few race cars, so also my inspiration. He's got a Porsche 911. He's got that. He's got a E30. He's got another 2002.
So do you want to revise your earlier statement for people who want to get into the mortgage business? If you were successful at it, you can do this.
Yeah,
is that your new support line for people?
Yeah. So.
No, this was super fun. I love that. I really appreciate having you on. Any other thoughts or comments or anything you want to?
I don't think so. Thanks for having me. This was great.
No, this was really a lot of fun. Don't forget to subscribe and rate our show. The Building Interest podcast is live on all podcast platforms and YouTube. We want to hear what you think of each episode and encourage you to submit any questions that you want us to cover, so please find us on YouTube or TikTok and comment your thoughts. All opinions expressed by Kate Garabedian are her own and not the opinions of LeaderBank NA. For more information on today's subject, visit leaderbank.com. In addition to past episodes, you can also find our Learning Center blog for more insights. This podcast is a production of LeaderBank, an equal housing lender, member FDIC, NMLS number 449250.